Hi, I'm Danny Rouse, and I'll be doing my presentation today on animal rights. I'm going to start off with my presentation with a simple question. How many of you believe that we should protect the animals of our earth better? I think this is a pretty easy question for a lot of people to answer that say, sure, I think it's right to treat animals better because it's a moral and kind thing to do. But I think the dilemma really starts to raise when we start thinking about whether it's worth it for the harm of our animals for the benefit of ourselves, such as for cosmetics or health or just testing other things in general. And I think that's where the line becomes kind of fuzzy. So hopefully after this presentation, people will be more towards my side of the spectrum, thinking that even though animal testing can bring some positive results, it's more of a harm than a good. Here's a little basic timeline of animal rights. The first form of animal rights legislation was an animal protection law passed in Ireland in 1635 that made it illegal to pull wool off sheep. Later in 1641, there was a colony in Massachusetts that wrote some legislation that said no man shall exercise any tyranny or cruelty towards any brute creature, which are usually kept for man's use. In 1693, moral philosopher John Locke wrote a book called Some Thoughts Concerning Education that talked about how animal cruelty was immoral and that we should consider the animal's feelings before we act. This was revolutionary because most people obviously weren't really regarding the feelings of animals at that time, and they were mostly weren't really concerned about the underlying reasons of why we were harming these animals. A lot of it had to do with ourselves. He later concluded that kids who tormented animals at a younger age become much more violent and callous towards the feelings of other humans. In 1870s, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was created by Henry Bergh in New York, and they basically policed the area, trying to make sure that no animals were abandoned or beaten. A lot of problems with being abandoned as an animal back then, because if a cow stopped producing milk or some other animal stopped being useful, they would just throw them out in the streets. And these protection groups were a huge trend for a while because activists were getting tired of not seeing animals protected by the law the way they deserve. States such as Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania followed with the same type of societies protecting these animals afterwards. Animal Protection Act was created in 1966, and it established appropriate treatment for the animals in the fields of research, transport, and exhibition. It excluded mice, birds, rats, and all cold-blooded animals. I mean, so these are basically the most popular animals still tested today because of this act. Multiple amendments have been taking place since this one, but they haven't had a ton of effect. By this time, as a society, we understood that animal cruelty was immoral, but when it comes to the benefit of humans, such as for testing, we still were kind of confused on whether it was right or wrong. Animals have been mistreated over time, and they continue to be. Testing has been one of the major problems. It has been around since Aristotle's time, and it became deeply rooted in our culture to test things on animals first before we test on ourselves. Over 100 million animals die per year due to testing. The most common animals, as I said earlier, were guinea pigs, rats, rabbits, fish, and monkeys. These tests can be extremely unreliable. According to the FDA, 92 out of every drug test that passes for animals fails for humans. And we have to weigh this in as important because the possibility of a successful drug versus killing an innocent animal, which one's more important to you? According to a National Cancer Institute, mice have been tested for years and they have cured cancer of some of these mice, but then none of these methods worked for humans. So obviously, there's a lot of difference between humans and mice, and some of these testing can just be a waste of money at the end of the day. Another major problem is factory farming. One of the major problems with factory farming is how they treat chickens and turkeys. Chickens are stuffed into cages with multiple hens. There's thousands and thousands of chickens in these farms. They cut off their beaks with a hot blade, and this is extremely painful for the bird, of course. There's very small cages that they're all crammed into, so they don't grow well because they're so cramped. And once they're all beaten and battered, they're shipped off to basically be electrocuted, and they're electrocuted because it makes their feathers fall off better. And I mean, this process is extremely kind of horrifying the more you read about it and how they're treated, and especially the amount that we eat chicken. And it's kind of eye opening. Here are some pictures of different animal cruelty in the U.S. Top right is a picture of a monkey that is being tested for cosmetics experimentation, and same with the monkey on the bottom right. I mean the mice. The rabbit on the bottom left is being tested also, and the top right are just two dogs that are attacking each other, which is not really a part of the animal testing, of course, but it's more a part of the animal cruelty and kind of how we view animals in the U.S. Not all of us, but a lot of people who do harm animals. Another problem is shooting animals for sport. This has been a pretty popular trend for some reason on social media the last couple of years. A lot of people are shooting animals as some type of trophy, and they're showcasing them to the rest of the world. This is a 19-year-old girl from Texas, and she went to Africa and killed a lion, a cheetah, and I think she also may have killed a rhino. She seemed like she was killing everything when she got there. And this is a problem, obviously, because if you read the little thing to the right, we were down to 50 white rhinos at one point, 50 in the world, and that's just crazy. Now we're back up to 20,000, and I think that kind of shows that even though if we do provide the right conservation efforts, we can protect these animals from endangerment, which is going to become important for a lot of these animals in Africa if people keep on hunting them at will or poaching them for their furs. Animals should be treated better. We can't just say that only animals like dogs and cats can be treated better because they're cute and those are our pets. We also have to respect the pigs and the chickens and the mice of the world. The reason we have rights is to stop unjust suffering. By giving animals more rights, they have extremely harsh punishments for violators, and some type of system with a lot of oversight. We can control the cruelty that is done to animals better. There's a book written by Tom Regan and Peter Singer called The Case for Animal Rights, and it's basically about how animals have been viewed as resources for us to exploit for our own consumption for way too long, and we should more view them as something that we should protect because if we don't protect them, who else? Also, if someone can agree that these animals retain moral rights, then they can agree that there's no justifiable reason to harm them. How do we make a difference? We can start by testing human cells in the lab instead of using animals. This is expensive, but obviously there's more correlation between the cells that we're testing on in humans, between obviously ourselves, and it doesn't harm any animals or people. Buying less furs and animal skins just lowers the demand for these type of products and hopefully will decrease the killings of a lot of animals to provide these furs, such as poaching of orangutans. Buy cruelty-free products such as this Honest multi-surface cleaner that I put in the bottom. There's also products at Trader Joe's and Tom's, the shoes. These are a lot better than buying Febreze and Windex, apparently, according to PETA, because they test their products heavily on animals. You can petition cosmetic testing because this is when most animals die and are harmed. Make sure you're at your home when you make different coconut oils or other type of moisturizers. Doing these do-it-yourself type products will help a lot for the testing on animals because if you're making your own products, then you're not getting something off the shelf that could have potentially harmed an animal. Animal cruelty is illegal in every state, so you should report it 100% when you see it. These criminals aren't just dangerous to animals, they also are dangerous to humans. In a study done by the Chicago Police Department, they found that 65% of people arrested for crimes against animals had also been arrested for battery. In conclusion, animal testing has been going on for way too long and it isn't very effective. We need to stop housing animals in locations where they can't move or grow effectively, like factory farms. Treating all animals and not viewing them as simply an endless resource will go a long way because it will start a cultural shift and then hopefully more legislation can be passed to protect all animals. I believe fully that if we try harder as a society to view animals equally and not just, like I said earlier, as our pets or as our resource, stuff like that, and we're more looking out for animals because if us as a society aren't looking out for animals, then who else will be? It's obviously other animals aren't going to be protecting the other animals. So after listening to this history of animal rights and all the wrongdoings man has done against animals, do you think that we should have more rights for the animals?